okay. I couldn't remember going to the well, yeah.
Oh, is it? I didn't know if something's going to come in there when I hit the button. Okay.
That's my first night. The first night?
All right.
Was he pleasure? Yeah. Don't you say it?
All right. Welcome back, World History. This is Mr. Miller. I'm going to be doing the lead off, the introduction of Chapter 5, Lesson 4. In Lesson 4, we're specifically focusing on the Kingdom of Cush. You're also going to be hearing Nubia a lot. We're going to be talking about some new places, some new people, and how they are impacted by the Egyptians and how they sort of, in some ways, interact with the Egyptians. And there's going to be a lot of interaction, actually. Why is this important? Understanding Cush, understanding Nubia, understanding the interactions with the Egyptians. Well, it's important because the kingdoms of Nubia and Cush were influenced by Egyptian culture and they continued many Egyptian traditions. All right, let's take a look at this map. Let me move my little picture over here. We're going to have a map and a timeline. Let's look specifically at the map first. The map is highlighting the areas where we're going to be seeing Nubia, where we have Cush. And you can see here, there's an outline. I know it's not a dark outline, but you can see a change in color. And you can see how it follows the Nile River, comes down south into the Nubian desert. It says approximate extent of the Kingdom of Cush circa 1500 BC. And you can see some cataracts there and how the Nile River continues south and then eventually sort of splits into the Blue Nile and the White Nile, which you don't need to know, but just an interesting fact. So we're actually looking further south now down the Nile River when we're talking about Cush and we're talking about Nubia. This timeline is pretty important here. This is going to sort of hopefully remind us about the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom of ancient Egypt, trying to keep all that separate. You can see here, if you go all the way to the left, we're looking at 5000 BC, when we first see settlement begin in the Nile River Valley. And then we have the timeline showing when the Old Kingdom begins, 2600 BC, when the Middle Kingdom begins, 2055 BC, and when the New Kingdom ends, 1070 BC. And then the last point on the timeline is Cush conquers Egypt, 750 BC. And that's the time period that we're going to be focusing on today. All right, guys, I'm going to hand it off here for geography to Miss Tickle.
Okay, guys, we're talking about the Nubians. So in Nubia, the land mainly consisted of savannas, which are your grassy flatlands. Egypt consisted of desert lands and a river valley. Remember, this is our second river valley civilization. The water source in Nubia was from rainfall. They didn't really have the river in the desert there and in the savannas. So Egypt had the Nile River. The crops in Nubia were beans, yams, rice, and grains. And in Egypt, it was wheat, rice, and other grains. So, stronger Nubian villages conquered weaker ones. The kingdom of Kerma is formed, and Mr. Miller showed you that on the map. He showed you Nubia, he showed you Cush, and he showed you Kerma, I believe. Didn't you, Mr. Miller? Did you show him Kerma?
They're kind of one and the same.
Kind of one and the same. Okay, so Kerma and Egypt developed a close relationship. This is going to mean that they developed maybe an alliance, and that led to cultural diffusion. This is where I need you guys to put like 4 stars around it. Cultural diffusion, cultural diffusion, cultural diffusion. We told you it's a huge theme of the year. You got to know cultural diffusion. So if they developed a close relationship, this would have meant that they were beginning to adopt each other's customs. So this led Egyptian armies to invade Nubia in the 1400s BC and ruled for 700 years. In response to that, the Nubians adopted many of the Egyptian beliefs and customs. Believe it or not, cultural diffusion can happen because of trade and war, and the Nile River provided that way for Egyptians to travel to the other civilizations that existed around and near the Nile and therefore their beliefs and customs spread, and those other civilizations adopted it. And we know that as cultural diffusion. So here's Mr. Cofield to give you more.
All right, guys, we're going to continue with the timeline of events, and keep in mind we're covering large amounts of time. To kind of put this all in perspective, the United States of America as a country is still less than 250 years old. We're talking about timelines of, the Egyptians ruling the Nubians for 700 years. So we're talking about long, long periods of time. But if you pick up with your timeline on page 15 there, we're going to jump ahead a little bit to 850 BC. And the Nubians are going to take advantage of a period of time where the Egyptians are somewhat weak, a weaker version of the Egyptians, and form their own independent kingdom known as Kush. And you can see it down there on the map, well, actually all the maps, and you can see that it's further up, remember, up the Nile River. And then they're going to gain in strength to the point where they're strong enough that they can invade Egypt, and they're going to take their army all the way to the Egyptian city of Thebes that you can see there on the first map in the top left corner, which is pretty far into the kingdom of Egypt. And by 728 BC, King Pi, or Pi, you really can pronounce that however you want, basically takes Kush to its farthest level of growth, to the point where he becomes the ruler of Egypt. Kush and Egypt kind of become one and the same. He styles himself like the Egyptian pharaohs as far as how he dressed and how he's depicted in the art of that time. But that's going to be a short-lasting rule for the Nubians. By 671 BC, so 140 years or so. No, going the wrong way. About 60 years. The Assyrians, who we've talked a lot about last chapter, they're going to march down into Egypt and conquer it and take control from the Kushites. Now, that doesn't mean Kush completely disappears from the map. It just kind of shrinks down in size. It doesn't incorporate all of Egypt like it used to. They're still located along the Nile River, just closer to the source. And they have a very successful capital city there of Meroe, which was right along the trade routes through Eastern Africa. So it's a very wealthy city because of many of the natural resources located nearby. And then finally in AD 350, so we're still 350 years from the birth of Christ, a kingdom of Axum, which is further to the east of Kush, closer to where modern day Ethiopia is now, they're going to invade Kush once and for all and kind of lay siege to the whole country, destroy the capital city of Meroe, and really that's when Kush will disappear from the history books. Okay, Ms. Hodges is going to step in here with a hot question for lesson 4.
All right, guys, so let's finish this up. You've worked really hard, and I know this was a long set of notes, but it's going to be fine. So we'll just get done really quick. So how did Nubia and Egypt influence each other? You've heard lots of details. You've heard lots of things to go between to reference this, so that things that they copied and from each other. So what I need for you to do is be sure to use the word cultural diffusion in your answer. All right, we want to make sure. I think that's the last one. Yeah. Be sure to use the word cultural diffusion in your answer. So to help you out, here are 2 pictures. One is from Kush, one is from Nubia. One is from Nubia and one is from Egypt. So this one in the top corner up here is from, let's see if it's going to write for me. So the one in the top corner is from that one right there where you see the little cursor. That one is from Nubia and this one is from Egypt. All right, guys, so there you go. Give us the good answers. Let's see what you got. Can't wait to see it. Thanks. Bye.